kind of laughing as I see that bumper video and the scrolling. I was like, they could have just filmed my son. Kidding, I love you. He does know when to put it down, so. Before I begin, how about my beautiful daughter? Sorry. That's what happens when you're a PK, and you're amazing, right? Last year on Mother's Day, I got my amazing son drumming, and today my daughter led worship for the first time. So got a little emotional about that. Today we are going to talk about walking in love. And what better day to do that than Mother's Day? Most of us have a mom or someone that we would call mom, someone who raised us or poured into us, who was a mother figure in our lives. I don't know your circumstances, but I'm assuming that we all have someone that is that person, or maybe we are that person to someone else. I have my own children. I've also suffered loss from miscarriage and ectopic pregnancy. And I was also blessed with a bonus daughter about 17 years into our marriage. And that was a huge blessing. If you can relate to just any of this, then you might know what it is to walk in love and what that looks like. So when I think of this, many Bible stories, in addition to the one that I was asked to speak on today, come to mind. And I think of the love of a mother. And there's a lot of things that come to mind. But as a child, my favorite Bible story was that of King Solomon's wisdom. King Solomon, the son of David, was not only a great king and a ruler, he was divinely inspired. Solomon's influence was felt primarily through Song of Songs, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. For those of you who may not be familiar with the story or King Solomon in general, I'm going to actually read straight from the Bible, from 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 16 through 28. Solomon, he had previously asked God for the gift of wisdom. You see, God told him he could ask for any gift he wanted. He didn't ask for riches. He didn't ask for fame. He asked for wisdom. And that pleased God, and so he granted it to him. So here we go, straight from Kings. I'm going to start at chapter 16. Solomon wisely judges. Then the two women who were prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. The one woman said, "Pardon me, my lord. This woman and I live in the same house and gave birth to a child while she was in the house. And it happened on the third day after I gave birth that this woman also gave birth to a child. We were together. There was no stranger with us in the house. And then this woman's son died in the night because she laid on him. So she got up in the middle of the night and took my son from beside me while I was asleep. And she laid him at her breast and laid the dead son at my breast. When I woke up in the morning to nurse my son, behold, he was dead. But when I examined him closely in the morning, behold, he was not the son whom I had borne." Then the other woman said, "No, the living one is my son, and the dead son is yours." But the first woman said, "No, for the dead son is your son, and the living one is mine." And so they spoke before the king, and they argued in front of him. And the king said, "The one says, 'This is my son who is living, and your son is dead.' And the other says, 'No, for the son is dead, and my son is the living one.' So the king said, 'Get me a sword.' So they brought a sword before the king, and the king said, 'Cut the living child in two and give half to one and half to the other.' And just then, the woman whose child was the living one spoke to the king, and she was deeply stirred. She said, 'Pardon me, my lord. No, please give her the living child. By no means kill him.' And the other woman was saying, 'He shall be neither mine nor yours.'" Sorry, I'm pretty sure she said it like that. "Cut him." Then the king replied, "Give the first woman the living child and by no means kill him. She is his mother. When all Israel heard about the judgment with the king, which the king had handed down, they feared the king because they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice. As a little girl, as I said, that was one of my favorite stories, and that is still one of Kariah's favorite stories as well. And I think I loved that story because I hoped that my mom would love me that way. There's something special and unique about a mother's love. It can usually be spotted from a mile away. I have a mom who was that mom, who is a warrior, who will fight not just for me, but for my friends and pretty much anyone that she loves. Now, I realize some of us might not have had that kind of mom, but maybe you had an aunt or a grandma or a special person that showed the kind of love I'm speaking about. Growing up in New York when I was younger, I was really close with my two cousins. My aunt, who I was also very close with, she was a drug addict for pretty much all of her life. She never got a grip on it. She was also influenced by the Sicilian mafia, and even when someone wanted to help her, they couldn't because they would have to deal with the rash from the mafia. When my cousins were very young, she gave over her rights of the boys to the boys' father. I think in her mind, she showed them love by not subjecting them to the lifestyle that she was living. But my grandma and we never really lost touch with them, especially my grandma. She never gave up on them. She remained close. And even though they lived several hours away after my uncle got custody, he moved them several hours away to what's actually upstate New York. And my grandma and I initially would drive about once a month to go visit them. But after one time I started to talk about my aunt around the boys, my uncle's new wife told my grandma that I wasn't welcome back. I was heartbroken that the visits stopped. But I only recently learned the reason why they stopped. My grandma never stopped going, though. And as this new stepmom became more insecure and abusive to the boys, my grandmother was that rock for my cousins. She was also the most consistent grandma with hospitality and showing love. She would basically roll out the red carpet no matter when we went over, and some of that comes from just being a Sicilian nonna, and some of it is just who she was. But whether she was making an elaborate Italian meal or a simple tuna fish sandwich for a random drop-in visit, the table was set, the food was ready, and you better be hungry. Up until the last time we visited her, shown in this picture over here, when Alzheimer's got the best of her, she was still concerned if we ate. My mom was with me. She didn't know who we were. But she was like, "Did you guys eat? Get them some food." She was like yelling at the staff at the nursing home. My aunt, however, she passed at age 45 of cervical cancer. And in her last days of her life, she did give her life to the Lord in a conversation with me. We spoke, and what she cared about most was, number one, her salvation, and number two, that I tell her boys how much she loved them and that she didn't go a day without thinking about them. I had made a recording for them at one point during a conversation the day before she died, because she just wanted to know, like, how I just don't know. I should have taken up my cross sooner, she told me. And I said, "Well, I'm going to record you right now. If you could say anything to them, what would you say?" And I recorded her through the phone. Recently, actually just yesterday, was it yesterday or the day before yesterday, my cousin shared that recording with me again. It was very emotional to hear her voice, but she said she wished she had taken up her cross sooner and she had been there for them. So you see, a mother's love, it never fades. We might not even know it, but it doesn't ever fade, no matter what the circumstance, whether it's evident to others or not. Your story, it could be similar to my cousin's, and maybe it wasn't your mom, but it was your grandma, or it was someone else, your aunt, whoever. Or it could be you. You could be the one who is there for other children, other people's children, maybe your own children. And sometimes that's the hardest because we have that biological connection that is undoubtable, and it's hard. Love doesn't mean just making our kids happy. And as Lee spoke of last week, we are in a you do what makes you happy society. Yet, depression, anxiety, and the level of mental illness in the world is greater than it has ever been. So what makes us happy may not actually be what makes us happy. My son knows that my least favorite saying in the whole world is you do you. If he's having a disagreement or if he just doesn't agree with one of his friends, and he doesn't do it anymore. It's been like years, I think, since you've said that, but it's you do you. No. It's backwards from the Christian mentality and what God commands of us. As I said, sometimes what we think makes us happy not only has the opposite effect, but it can have long-term effects on our life and possibly on our salvation. What often we think makes us happy is something that has been pushed on us or falsely promised to us by society, by social media, or even by a friend who is an influence in our life. Oftentimes, some of those people might not even know that their highlight reel is exactly what is the root at our feeling unworthy and unjust and unloved. How do we drown out the voices in the world in order to create unity and to allow ourselves to be love and truth? Jesus says he is the truth. John 14:6. Isaiah calls the Lord the God of truth. Isaiah 65. And the Apostle John rejoices to find Christians walking in truth just as they were commanded by the Father. Jesus also says the greatest of these commands is love. Not only that, but love your neighbor as yourself. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Do to others as you would have do to them. And Corinthians, of course, says do everything in love. Proverbs 17:17, a friend loves at all times. So friends, as we look at the book of 2 John, know that this is an epistle, and an epistle means a letter. So this letter was written to a specific woman. We don't know who she is, but this was a specific woman he was writing this letter to. And speaking of hospitality, this is one of the reasons I love this scripture. If anyone knows me, you know how much I love to cook and set the table and be hospitable to those that I love. And although I fully believe I inherited this from my grandmother and from my mom, I also have come to realize that it is a really great spiritual gift. I want to first look at the Message version of 2 John. So I realize some people might have opinions on the Message version of the Bible, but my husband pointed out this version is pretty profound in its interpretation. So if you have the Bible app on your phone, go ahead and switch it to the Message version so you can read along. If you don't have it electronically, whatever version you have, just go ahead and read along as well. I'm just going to read through this small book of 2 John, verses 1 through 11. My dear congregation, I, your pastor, love you in very truth, and I am not alone. Everyone who knows the truth that has taken up permanent residence in us loves you. Let grace, mercy, and peace be with us in truth and love from God the Father and from Jesus Christ the Son. I can't tell you how happy I am to learn that many members of your congregation are diligent in living out truth, exactly as commanded by the Father. But permit me a reminder, friends, and this is not a new command, but is simply a repetition of our original and basic character, that we love each other. And some translations say, walk in love. Love means following his commandments, and unifying his commandment is that you conduct your lives in love. This is the first thing you heard, and nothing has changed. Don't walk out on God. There are a lot of smooth-talking con artists loose in the world who refuse to believe that Jesus Christ was truly a human, a flesh and blood human being. Give them their true title, deceiver, antichrist, and be very careful around them so you don't lose out on what we've worked so diligently in together. I want you to get every reward coming to you. Anyone who gets so progressive in his thinking that he walks out on the teaching of Christ walks out on God. But whoever stays with the teaching stays faithful to both the Father and the Son. If anyone shows up who doesn't hold to his teaching, don't invite him in. Don't give him the run of the place. That would just give him a platform to perpetuate his evil ways, making you his partner. As you can see, 2 John focuses on two issues, truth and love. He starts with the love, the new old commandment, the new commandment I give you. And he's writing to a woman who, she was apparently a well-known in the church because he didn't have to give her a name. He just refers to her in most translations as beloved woman. And that's the only part of the Message version that I wish they got right, as I would say. I wish sometimes we could just mesh a couple different versions together and make our own, but we don't get to do that. So we'll just go with the traditional version on that, where it says, beloved woman. So here, he's giving her instructions about what to do when people come to her seeking hospitality who are not genuine teachers of the gospel. Apparently, she was known for her hospitality to traveling teachers, to evangelists, and church planters. She evidently had been approached by some false teachers, perhaps the same kind of false teachers that Apostle Paul talks about in Galatians. They had a ministry with a sort of secret agenda among John's congregations, attempting to make converts and taking advantage of Christian hospitality in order to advance their own cause. She felt deeply the need to be loving and to be friendly and positive to everyone. So she knew that love was her first duty in her hospitality, and that it was also her spiritual gift. Yet she didn't want to do anything to encourage these false teachers. So she had written a letter to John to ask his advice. And in the first half of this epistle, John is praising her for her love and her virtues of love. And then he spends the second half talking about the importance of truth. He goes on to say these two things go hand in hand. You cannot divorce truth from love, because the minute you do that, it destroys one or the other. The two are bound together, so that if you take truth away from the equation of love, it becomes not love anymore, but compromise. It corrupts the very nature of love, because love rejoices in truth. It does not rejoice in inequity. And you can't take love away from truth, because then that just becomes brutal, like a tyranny or abuse or fundamentalism in the way that we sometimes see it expressed today. The Apostle John is telling this woman to keep these two things in balance. Balance is the most important. You cannot forsake truth in the name of love, and you cannot forsake love in the name of truth. He also ends up saying, if someone comes up to you and doesn't believe, if he comes from a different gospel or he comes proclaiming a different Christ, John says, don't receive him in your house. Don't even give him a greeting. He's not saying just don't be polite or just don't show any kind of public. He's saying don't show any kind of public honor or engagement. Don't give assistance to people who are teaching a false gospel. Because if you do that, he says you become a partaker in their evil ways. In today's words, I would say guilty by association. It's something we speak about to our children a lot, especially as my son is at the age where there's parties and things going on and he's getting ready to go to college. And we've talked to him about the consequences of if you choose to go to this party and something goes down, whether you have done anything wrong or not, you will be in trouble. You will be guilty by association. So again, it's just a great balance. And it's hard because sometimes we have to give up things that we might like or think that we love. We're supposed to love one another, and then the world knows us by our love. So does this mean that we shouldn't ever argue about doctrine? Well, I think that's debatable and maybe a whole nother sermon. But the Apostle John, who was known as the Apostle of Love, he basically says, if someone comes to you with a different doctrine, don't let him in your house. How does this relate? Do any of you remember the image from last time? I spoke of this image of this woman with headphones on, and it says God on the side of her headphones. And I just had to bring this up again because this symbolism is so powerful to me. I think I shared like every couple months I put it as my background on my phone just as a reminder. It makes me think of the battle we have even with our music today. And my kids know that I talk about this all the time with them. Now, I can't control every part of their lives. I can't be with them every second. But if I can at least protect them while they're in my home and have certain rules in my home, then I'm going to do the absolute best I can. See, we often allow ourselves to be influenced by what is going in us, in our ears, in our eyes, what we're taking in, and we might not even realize it. There's a song by Andy Mineo called Mama Taught Me, and the lyrics to me were so profound. I remember the first time I heard this song, I was vacuuming, and I just had to like stop and go, whoa, that was so good, and just like, I'm going to speak about this at some point. But I apologize for those of you who might not be familiar with the connotations in this song, but if you use your imagination, you'll understand the gist of it. He says, I'm talking wobble, wobble, talking shake it, drop it, talk, take it. And what he says is, when you grow up on that, tell me, what you gonna think about a woman every time she walks past? Just what it is, okay? It is what it is. There's that sort of you do you, live and let live, right? Andy is basically saying in these lyrics the same thing I'm speaking of. Whether it's wobble that resonates with you or you're from a different era, there's almost always been music that demoralizes women. When we listen to music like that and we allow ourselves to be influenced by it, whether we realize it or not, if we're choosing to listen to it, it's going in. It's going in. If we're listening to lyrics that are not honoring, especially to women, but even to ourselves, then what are you expecting young men to think about when they see an attractive woman walk by? On a side note, I fully believe this is one of the reasons why we have a society that is so addicted to pornography. That, again, could be a whole nother sermon, but it definitely has to do with what we're talking about today. And being influenced by something that is not holy, whatever that might be. So, again, as Lee spoke of last week, if you didn't hear his message, I highly encourage you to go back on our YouTube page or on the podcast and look up Altitude Church and listen to his message. He had a key thought that was so great, I just had to reiterate it. He said, it's time to reject you do you and replace it with how is this reflecting Jesus in you? And I'd go even further to say, how is this creating unity? How is this walking in love? It also reminds me of a time a few years ago I was invited to a Pitbull concert. As many of you know, I am a hip-hop girl at heart. And while now I pretty much only listen to Christian rap and hip hop, you guys, it's gotten so much better. If you haven't heard for a while, it is not that of what it was in the 80s and 90s. But so my friend invited me to this Pitbull concert, and I was like, borderline. I wasn't as strong in my faith then, even as I am today, but I was a little worried, but I do love his music. I love his vibe, his energy. He has the coolest voice, right? So I was like, yeah, I'll go have a girls' night out, and we went to this concert. The first opening act was atrocious. I wanted to leave, and I think my friend sensed my discomfort. She was like, you want to go walk around until Pitbull starts? I'm like, yes, please, because I cannot do this. I won't say who that was, but wow. So anyway, he came on and started to play, and I was pleasantly surprised. Even his dancers, they're in the little bit of sexy hip-hop, but they weren't overly provocative like the previous act, and they were actually really good dancers. They weren't just like moving. They were really good choreographed dancers, and I thought that was pretty cool. And then in the middle of his concert, he stopped, and he said, I got some stuff going on in my life, and I don't know about you, but I believe in God, and so I'd like to just take a minute to pray. Well, I thought that was pretty cool. I was like, oh my gosh, that's really awesome. I didn't know he was a Christian, right? That was my thought. So fast forward a few months later, and I'm having a discussion with one of my friends who I think I've mentioned her a few times as a recording artist, and she's one of my spiritual mentors as well, and she was just warning me. We were just having a conversation about the industry and about music and all the things, and she just said, you just have to be really careful with what you listen to and what you let your kids listen to. She shared a little bit about even some Christian artists who are not walking in truth and love. And she's like, just be careful what you don't take them too seriously. And then she shared a little bit about some secular artists who were really walking with the Lord that she had met through her days and was like, this is really good music. And it was just this great conversation. Well, as she began to expand on it, I was kind of excited because I wanted to share with her about Pitbull praying at his concert because I thought that was pretty cool, right? So I started to tell her about it, and she stops me literally like that and goes, Chaundra, did you not hear anything I just said? I was like, wait, what? What do you mean? And she's like, of course he stopped to pray at his concert. That's how you influence the masses. Because anyone who was there who was hesitant or thinking a little bit like you is now going to say, oh, he's a Christian. I should go buy his music. She was like, do you really think that he walks the walk? Do you really think that? And she's like, I'm not saying he's a bad person. Yeah, he does have some great music. But don't think that just because someone stops to pray, and I could list many artists who are publicly praying, who are not walking in love or light, who are actually really affiliated with a lot deeper depths of darkness. But they will pray, and they will make sure that that's posted on their Instagram, right? So it's going back to being a false teacher, an influencer who's leading people astray. And John is warning us here of this. We recently set our daughter up, and I did ask her permission to speak of this, to post YouTube videos. And she's not really a tech girl. She would much rather be outside playing or running around or doing anything other than being on a screen. But she also loves dance. And so this thing with reels and dances and all this popular stuff that's happening right now, she really wanted to be a part of that. So we agreed with limitations. We make it so nobody can comment. The comments are turned off. She can't receive comments. She can't receive private messages. We've tried to be as safe as we can with it, although I don't know if any of it is safe. But she does some pretty cool things. You guys should check out her YouTube page. And she's got a really cool video with her and her dad. It's Karaya's Creations with a K. But she quickly became obsessed, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, with how many likes she gets on a particular video. And that's normal. But there are times when she'll post something and just wait to see how many likes come in. So now, as parents, we have to help her. We have to help her to walk in love, to create unity with what she's posting, and to use her love of dance and her love of cooking to inspire others, but not be so consumed with that part of it. We've also really worked hard to find more wholesome music because a lot of the popular dances go to specific songs. And in fact, just last week, she was making a video, and I wasn't really paying attention, and Daniel comes over, and he's like, "Mom, she cannot do that." I didn't hear really anything bad, but he warned me. And thank you for that, because we were like, nope, sorry, you could do the moves, but you got to pick a different song to do it to. Our hope is that Kariah can inspire a new generation, that she can choose different music that's wholesome and choose dance moves that are more wholesome. And she can be an influencer in a positive light. And if you know my daughter and you know how perseverant she is, if anyone can do it, it's her. She has on her list right now to create a video that speaks about bullying because she has several friends who are getting bullied. And that's something that's really on her heart. She wants to make a video of that. So we just have to do our best to keep her and even Daniel, even though he's 17 and going off to college, and all the kids. I have several extended family kids, Landon, in our lives, to just be careful, because so many of these platforms are set to seduce young children, and many of them under these false pretenses that John speaks of in 2 John. The bottom line is that love and truth are inseparable, especially when we are living to become more like Jesus. And it doesn't mean that it's easy, because we all want our children to be happy. We want our friends to be happy. We want our spouses to be happy, right? So I'd like to review 2 John again, just the beginning and the CSB this time. To the elect lady and her children, whom I love in the truth, and not only I, but also all who know the truth, because of this truth that remains in us and will be with us forever. We see John focused on this idea of truth as he was in all of his writings. He used the word truth 37 times in his New Testament writings. And this shows that what binds Christians together is not social compatibility or political compatibility or class compatibility. What combines us together is a common truth. This is why truth is so important. So, truth in love. I'm going to give you an example of how I've done my best to live this out. And this is hard for me to share. I know people have different opinions on things, but I'm just going to share from my heart, and hopefully it will resonate a little bit with you. I'm not going to share all the details because it's not fully my story to tell, but someone that we care about very deeply is facing a deep identity crisis, a gender identity crisis, as we see so many in the world today. When my friend called me, she kind of warned me what was going on in their lives and things, and then we've been praying and talking and staying in touch, and then about 6 months later, she said, I need to talk to you when you have time to actually listen and pay attention. So when she called to share about what they'd been facing and share all the things that they were going to start allowing him to go through, I had braced myself because I knew that this conversation was coming. I prayed fervently to God to just give me the words to help me show love and yet speak truth, because this is someone I was there when he was born. My friend was really surprised, and she even said that she thought that I was going to judge her. But I think, as with King Solomon, God just gave me the right words to be able to show her how much I love her and their family. She thought I was going to shame them, which is something that I would never do, but she was happy that I could understand. We went on to talk a lot more about a lot of different things. She's also a counselor at a school in Utah and dealing with a lot of stuff out there. She had just had a school shooting, and we just had some really good conversation about all that's on her heart and how hard this is for her. And at the end of the conversation, she said, I love you, and I'm so happy that you can just accept this. And that's where I had to stop her. Because I said, accepting and loving, honey, are two different things. And I don't mean accepting the person, because I will always accept and love this person. But I mean accepting, but it means accepting the choice and condoning a choice. I don't have to do that. But things aren't going to be different, but I just need you to know that's not part of this journey. I shared that I will love them and be there with them through everything. But I found out later that a lot of his confusion began when Instagram added this little option to put pronouns. And he decided to just say they. And so he was still not sure. And he shared with me later that as soon as he did that, he started getting messages from people kind of forcing him into saying, if this is how you feel, then you should start transitioning. And he said, Aunt Chaundra, I don't really know, but I think this is what I should do. And so I just walked with him through that. And I said, okay, let's look at this. What made you come to that conclusion in the first place? What made you change that in the first place? And if this is how you're really feeling, we can walk through this together. But it doesn't mean I'm going to accept the choice, accepting you and walking in love beside you through it. Absolutely. Knowing that you are a son of God and you are loved. That is all I want you to know. And that is the most important message that I can convey to him. So I don't want to get into, obviously, political debate, or there's people who feel very differently about these things. And like I said, this was a really scary story for me to share. But we're talking about truth in love through a biblical worldview, right? From there, I've had great conversations with not only him and his mom, but others who are struggling with similar concerns. And I've even had some of our high schoolers say, wow, I can't believe that you're not judging me. Of course not. We're not commanded to judge. We are commanded to walk in truth and love. And that's the balance, and that's where we must stand firm. When we choose to quiet the inbox, the negative, the untrue, and the unjust influencers, and we choose to love with truth and grace, it means that we start to bring our lives in conformity with God's revealed truth. We should stand firm in the truth of God's word, teach the truth plainly, and take it as the starting point for our moral decisions. None of us get this right all the time. We're human. That's not even possible. But as I said, when we are striving to become more like Jesus, we do our best to do that every day, to make a better choice today than we did yesterday. So we should reflect on God's trustworthiness and his faithfulness in our daily lives. Speaking truth is hard. Satan, he tries to deceive people through allowing us to have different facts and opinions and to lie. And oh boy, does God hate a lying tongue. And Satan, he lies to us continuously. He lies about our worth, about our identity, about our talent, about our favor. The main lesson of 2 John is that truth determines the bounds of love and unity. Therefore, truth must exist before love can even begin to unite us. For truth generates love. 1 Peter 1:22 says that. Now that you've cleaned up your lives by following the truth, love one another as if your lives depended on it. This is why, as humans, truth is so important. From always telling the truth as a child and how that carries over into deceitfulness as an adult. Teaching our children and the children and youth in our lives about not lying, about accountability, and always telling the truth. It should be the number one thing that we're teaching. If we don't, there can be huge implications that can come from life. We're in a society that is accepting of lies, and as a parent, one of the most important responsibilities we have is to help our children understand the importance of that, the importance of telling the truth. God hates a lying tongue, and getting into a habit of lying, even from a young age, it lets Satan in. It can be the smallest thing, but it gives Satan a window of opportunity. He loves it when we lie and we aren't honest with one another. I don't remember the exact verse, but C.S. Lewis speaks of this quite a bit in Screw Tape Letters when he's telling Wormwood, if they lie, boy, you can get right in there. If you have not read Screw Tape Letters from C.S. Lewis, incredibly profound. Friends, the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy. But God has come so that we can have eternal life. You have hopefully heard this before. Let that resonate with you. When we stand firm in the truth of God's word and we show love to others, we create unity. And when we turn away or we help others turn away from deceitful nature and we walk in love, God rejoices. Pray with me. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for this day, for this beautiful Mother's Day, rainy or not. We know you are in it. We love you and we praise you, God. And I pray that these words, even the most difficult ones, would land with a soft heart, and that we would all just take a deeper look at truth and love and what your word says about each of these things. We love you so much, God. I'm so thankful for this incredible place where we can do that, where two people who have completely different views on any topic can sit next to each other in this place in love and respect and unity. It is in your holy Son's name I pray. Amen.